So our next speaker, National Young Farmer Coalition Executive Director, Lindsey Lusher Shute, is a leading advocate for independent and sustainable farms. As a young farmer herself, she is acutely aware of the challenges that young and beginning farmers face. With a background in organizing and state policy, Lindsey co-founded the National Young Farmer Coalition as a platform for young progressive farmers to have a meaningful influence on the structural obstacles in the way of their success. In its first 5 years, NYFC has engaged tens of thousands of farmers in policy action, galvanized the land trust community around farmland affordability, and organized 28 rural chapters. I'm sure it's actually way more than that at this point. I'm not sure how many total chapters there are, but they are growing all the time. Lindsey is widely recognized as an expert on the structural issues facing family farms and was named a champion of change by the White House in 2014. It's my pleasure to introduce Lindsey to the stage.
Hello. It's great to be here. The Quivira Coalition has sort of long been part of the National Young Farmers Coalition. Avery was actually one of our founding board members. Virginia was also on our board, and now Kate Greenberg of our staff is on the board of the Quivira Coalition. So I've heard so many great things about this gathering and this organization, and it is just a real pleasure and honor to be here with all of you today. First of all, I guess I just need to out myself here. I am a vegetable grower. Are there any vegetable growers in the house? Probably a stupid question to ask at a ranching conference. A few? Okay, great, excellent. My husband and I own and operate Hardy Roots Community Farm, which is large by Northeast standards. It's about 75 acres, which is little small around here, I recognize. In any given year, we grow about 25 acres of certified organic vegetables. We raise about 15 pigs and manage a flock of around 1,000 laying hens that we rotate around our pasture. So I'm not here to talk about ranching, that's for sure. What I am here to do, frankly, is to ask for your help, all of you. And we certainly may need it after Tuesday, even more. I'm here on behalf of thousands of young and beginning farmers across the country. Young and beginning farmers who are smart, who are ambitious, who are highly trained in some cases, who are entrepreneurial. And these young and beginning farmers are facing obstacles that are simply too big for them to overcome on their own, and they need help. I know this because of the struggles that my husband and I faced in starting our farm. We're now in our 13th season. We actually just completed our 13th season at Hardy Roots, but we are a very rare success story. We started our farm in 2004. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about it because I think it gives good perspective on many of the young people that we work with at the coalition who are coming from non-farm backgrounds. My husband actually grew up in New York City. I grew up in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, and we met community gardening in New York City. And my husband, Ben, like many of the farmers in our coalition, he found farming and his passion in college, actually not even studying farming at all, but felt like he wanted to be an active participant in a food system that was fair and was just and was contributing to clean air and water and soil. And so he did an apprenticeship out west at an organic farm, came back to the city thinking, all right, well, I'm from the city, I'm going to be in the city, but really realized that he wanted to be a farmer, and that was what was in his heart. And so he had an opportunity to go up and farm in the Hudson Valley of New York State, where our farm is now, about 100 miles north of New York City. And he rented land from a dairy farming couple in their 80s, Pete and Alice Bulkley. These are the kind of farmers that I think Ben and I would like to grow up to be someday. They're farmers with a great deal of experience, great deal of kindness, great deal of perspective on the world. Pete and Alice rented initially just a half acre to the farm, then an acre, then 5 acres. They initially thought we were completely crazy. They were dairy farmers, and they had managed that farm, which actually was built in 1733. That particular farm was established at this point not by their families, but of course by generations past. And they had lived through the 80s on that dairy farm, and they had seen most of the dairy farms in our region go out of business. And their children, they had 4 kids, all of those kids moved off the farm, and none of them, although they actually were somewhat involved in agriculture in their own ways, none of them came back to manage the farm as perhaps they had thought they would at some point. So these young vegetable farmers come along and want to rent land that is not meant for vegetable growing, but did just fine to get us going. But during the time that we were renting that land, Pete and Alice both passed away. And that land, that farm that had supported a family farm enterprise for 300 years, that farm went on the market for $2.7 million, and that was 100 acres at that point. So we realized that we were no longer going to be farming there, and we had to leave that farm. We rented from another farmer in the region, which outside of New York City, 100 miles north of New York City, those working farm owners, those owner-operators are increasingly rare, I'm sad to say. But we rented from another farmer, and we had a 5-year rolling lease, but we had no opportunity to make capital improvements on that land, and therefore realized that that was not going to be a place that was going to support our family for the future. And so we went out and tried to buy land to have long-term land tenure, safe, secure land access, and found that there was not any property in our region that was under $1 million. And from a farming perspective, it made no sense to try to buy land. And it was at that point in time that the coalition came about, the National Young Farmers Coalition. And with farmers in our region, Washington State, in Michigan, we formed the coalition as a platform to do a very basic thing, and that's to give the next generation of farmers a chance to succeed. Because stories like mine, not being able to find affordable, permanent land access, just the most basic foundation you need to start a sustainable and viable farm or ranch, that is just simply not available to many young people who are coming into farming today. Young Farmers Coalition, we have about 30 chapters now around the country in 26 states. And these chapters are basically the foundation of our grassroots base across the country. And that grassroots base works to support farmers through business services and also through policy change. Our leadership convergence was actually just last week in Encinitas, California. We had over 60 young people coming from all across the country to learn about how they can be a leader in the food system and leader in particular, how they can work in their communities and how they can work on federal policy. And so when I was meeting with these leaders last week in Encinitas, I got to hear some more stories about what they're facing in building their own farms, as they're also building their own chapters of the National Young Farmers Coalition as a platform for local support. So just to give you a snippet of some of those, I met a young farmer from Georgia. Georgia did not participate in the Medicaid expansion under Obamacare. And so this young farmer was caught in the middle between, where she basically there was no subsidy for her in her income bracket, and she had a child and she was still on health insurance, and then the health insurance went up to about $1,500 a month for her, which was completely unaffordable as a beginning farmer. And so she, like actually I heard also from quite a few farmers in Colorado, now has no health insurance whatsoever and is farming. And as we know, farming is a very risky profession. And her husband actually had a significant injury and had to go to the emergency room a few weeks ago, and now they are, rather than paying health insurance, they are paying emergency bills. Another farmer from Minnesota, he came to the United States from Mexico when he was 10. Highly skilled farmer, and he is growing vegetables for his community. And is particularly interested in growing vegetables for the Mexican-American community in his town. And this farmer cannot access any government programs to build his farm. No FSA loans, for instance. How can you capitalize a farm if you don't have access to those basic services? We often, and myself, I'm going to talk about the lack of young and beginning farmers in this country in a couple of minutes here. But I think if we're honest with ourselves, if we realize that we have a wealth of experience and knowledge and skill in a community of immigrants that is here in the United States, farm workers, and if we want to have farmers in the future, if we want to have a sustainable landscape of people working the land in a responsible way, we need to provide pathways for those farmers to become farm owners. Thank you. I also talked to a Colorado farmer who studied agriculture in school. He went to college, like many of us are encouraged to do, and now he is having trouble making ends meet because he has student loans that are very difficult to pay back on a farm income. And perhaps the last story that is actually not, well, she was at the convening, but is also a close friend from New York, livestock grower who also started out as, from a non-farming background, and her dream was to grow pigs and sheep for a direct market in New York State, which there's a pretty strong market there, but she went to 2 apprenticeship programs, worked on farms, worked in an incubator program, started her own farm business, and just announced a few weeks ago that she's shutting it down because she's not making enough money. She's going to go work for another farmer as a livestock manager. And there's nothing wrong with that. We need to have, on our farm, we have 3 managers every season, and we have a crew of farm workers. We employ about 10 people on our farm in a given season. But I think that there is something truly lost when a young person who has so much ambition, so much potential, doesn't have the opportunity to become their own operator on their own farm. I think we need to be able to support young entrepreneurs in this system. The fact that right now it is so hard for young people to get into agriculture, that is borne out in the statistics that we see coming from the USDA. Does anybody know the average age of the farmer in the United States? All right, 58. Yep, that's right. Now, how many farmers do you think we have under the age of 35 who are grossing more than $50,000 in the United States? Guesses? 6? A little low. All right. Well, I'm sorry? All right. Well, that's also, gosh, you guys are pessimistic. It's 37,000. That's not very many, y'all. That's half the population of Santa Fe. These are the owner-operators that are going to be responsible for feeding 320 million people today, a growing population in the United States. That is utterly unsustainable. We have, for every 1 farmer we have under 35, we have 6 over 65. We have a crisis. We need young people in agriculture. With all the options that young people have these days, we must make farming competitive as a career. The farmers and ranchers in this room know how rewarding farming can be, the feeling of being part of the earth, of feeding people, of being your own boss. But that's just not enough. There needs to be a path for economic viability. There needs to be a career there where people can save for retirement, where they can have a family if they want to. There are simply too many people, since I helped to get this coalition off the ground, too many young people who I've seen as bright starts in the field of agriculture who once they reach their late 20s or early 30s, they decide, oh wow, we want to have a family. And then they get out, and then they retire. That is not sustainable. Without more young people in agriculture, we are going to face a future with more consolidation on farms and ranches, more developments on farms, fouled land, and food insecurity. Those of us in farm country are already seeing it already. Longtime farmers are retiring, and there is no one to replace them. American farmers steward nearly 1 billion acres of land in the United States, which is about half the land area of this country. And 63% of this land is operated by farmers 55 and older. So that means in the next 20 to 30 years, all of that land is going to need to find a new manager, someone to take the reins. That's why all these things, this is why I'm here to ask for your help. Wes Jackson was just talking about, the big problems we see in our world. And how we need to focus on local solutions, which I think is absolutely right, and certainly in these times when we have many big problems around us. And there are many solutions indeed at the local level where young and beginning farmers can find support from all of you as mentors, and opportunities to rent or even sell your land perhaps to a beginning farmer at some point. But it is undeniable that the federal government has an incredible influence on farms in the United States. If you go to our farm, which I recently did with a reporter to talk about all of the ways in which the federal government influences our operation, it's pretty incredible, from our organic certification to the conservation easement that we have on our farm, 50% of which was paid for by the Natural Resources Conservation Service, to the FSA loan that we needed to get for our wash and pack facility, to our farm worker housing restrictions. The list goes on and on. Soon, it's going to be the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is dictating how we are going to design our future washing and packing facilities. We must, in some cases, focus big. And that doesn't mean that there isn't much to be done at the local level, because ultimately it's the relationships that we have with our local members of Congress. It's the relationships and the value that you all bring at the local level that they see, that they can see in their own districts, and they actually find very valuable, that then does make a difference on the federal level. Farm Bill, I don't know who's going to write it, but I can tell you, I lived in New York City, and it's where Donald Trump is from, and it is not a farm. It's nowhere near a farm. And we have a lot to teach many of our elected officials about what it's like to farm and ranch. So I want to go through a few ideas that we have to address the major concerns, the major obstacles that young and beginning farmers face in the United States. And I would love to continue this conversation here with many of you about opportunities to move some of these ideas forward in the next Farm Bill. Some of these things also have opportunity on the state and actually local level as well, and I'll point those out. So when the Young Farmers Coalition got started in 2010, one of the first things that we did is to survey young and beginning farmers across the country we're hearing their stories and the problems that they were facing, but we wanted to know how they would rank those problems. And so number 1 was capital, and number 2 was land access, and we're going to go through those first. So capital, getting money to farm, right? That is difficult. And the way Young Farmers Coalition has been focusing on this, first we've been working with the Farm Service Agency in DC to improve a lot of the existing FSA loan programs. One of the most important things that we would like to see is that the FSA actually just move a lot of its process online. It's very antiquated right now, and it takes way too long to get a loan from FSA. And along those lines, we would like pre-approval for farm ownership loans. So you don't have to go and find a farm that you would like, and then go to your office, and then wait for some papers, and then wait many weeks for approvals. That is not helpful. And so we are really pushing the Farm Service Agency to act like a regular bank in 2016 and help to move some of these transactions along more quickly and to front load more of the work that it takes to make a loan to young and beginning farmers. We also want higher lending limits for loans. Right now they're way too low to accommodate the price of land. The next thing is student debt that I talked about. Student debt is a problem for young people all across the country. However, for farmers, it's particularly tricky. Farmers, in addition to making a low income when you're just getting started in your operation, you're also looking to capitalize that operation. So what we're seeing is farmers actually being turned down for the capital that they need to buy land, to finance a tractor, whatever it might be, because of their student loans. That is unacceptable. We did a survey of farmers after our initial survey specifically on the issue of student loans. About 600 farmers from across the country responded to that survey, and more than 50% of them had about $25,000 in debt. Overall, across the country, we have about 70% of college graduates that are coming out of their programs with student loans. And in my opinion, we simply cannot make student loans such an obstacle that we are, eliminating the possibility of farming and ranching for 70% of graduates that are coming out of colleges these days. So our proposal to solve this to solve this problem is simple, and that is to add farmers to the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. This is a program that is presently offered to teachers, doctors, government employees. These are low-earning, high-need careers. And this would allow farmers to be on an income-based repayment program. So essentially that means for 10 years, if they were working on a qualified farmer ranch on a full-time basis, not as a hobby farmer, and they were making on-time payments that were income-based, at the end of 10 years, 10 years of commitment to farming and ranching, they would have the opportunity for debt forgiveness. We believe that this would really change the fates of many of the young farmers in our coalition that have great potential and are struggling because they made the choice to go to college. The next issue, big issue that farmers identified on our survey, was the issue of land. Farmland prices have been rising steadily since the mid-1980s, both in real and in inflation-adjusted terms. Between 2004 and 2014, national farm values nearly doubled. Areas like where we live, where my farm is, within an urban food shed, are particularly challenged by this issue. Solving the challenges of farmland affordability is likely the most important thing we can do to secure a future with farmers and with good food. So the way that we are addressing this issue, or one of the proposals that we have, is to actually use conservation easements as a tool for transition. A conservation easement is essentially a way to protect land from development in the future. So a farmer or rancher sells or donates the development rights on their land to a local land trust or a municipality. And by doing that, it precludes that land from being developed in the future. Now, that is a very good thing. However, we're seeing that even much of the land that is protected, this land still becomes unaffordable for new farmers. There are different reasons for that, but some of it is because of the pressure of a state ownership. Folks who would be very happy to live on a farm or ranch, but have no intention to actually grow food there. And so what we have been doing, Young Farmers Coalition, is we have been working with land trusts across the country. We've now trained 87 land trusts on the use of working farm easements. And essentially, those are easements that protect the land from future development, and they ensure that the land will always remain affordable to farmers. So when a farmer is ready to transition their land to the next generation, to sell their land, they have to sell that land to a farmer or rancher, someone who's making more than 50% of their income from farm sales. This is a tool that's been used with great success in Vermont and Massachusetts, where they've been transferring hundreds of dairy farms in particular from generation to the next, and that farmland is remaining affordable to those farmers or ranchers. We also think that these working farm easements have great potential in this region where water is a huge issue, and farmland and irrigated farmland is incredibly expensive. So we think that there is potentially a way forward to use conservation easements as a place to conserve water on farms and also help the next generation of farmers get affordable land. The next area of opportunity, we believe, is to think about taxes and how taxes and capital gains taxes in particular presently create a disincentive for farmers to transition their land, farmers and ranchers to transition their land while they are alive. So the cheapest way right now, if you would like to transition your land to the next generation, is essentially to die, and then to have your heirs take on that land, because then they will have a stepped-up basis, all these things that I'm learning about, and they will pay less capital gains for that property. That is unsustainable entirely. This is something that this lack of farm transition planning is a problem throughout our sector. I know on my family's land in Ohio, this is what my grandfather chose to do, and that land was then divided into 4 pieces for 4 boys. Two pieces were developed and logged. So this is not ideal, and we believe that there are real opportunities within the tax code to incentivize existing farmers and ranchers to create a transition plan, and by doing so, they would receive a more favorable tax treatment. So the last area of emphasis for us, and actually this is not something that even came up in this initial survey that we did of young farmers and ranchers, and I think it's potentially because we didn't even ask about it, which is I'm just absolutely embarrassed to admit, but this is water, right? You all are like, yeah, all right. This girl from the Northeast, where when we first started farming, we and we had torrential rains and thought that this was our future with climate change. But this year we are learning because we have had a historic drought in the Northeast, and this is something that essentially the last 2 generations of farmers have not seen the likes of in New York State. And our pond went dry, and we use pretty efficient techniques, but we still had to have an excavator come and dig out a larger portion of the pond so we would have water to feed our crops. So I'm learning. But thanks to our Western program, which Kate Greenberg runs here from Durango, Colorado, and she has really helped our coalition to really get our heads around water and access to water. And this year, Kate was the author of a report called Conservation Generation. And she actually surveyed 380 farmers from the Colorado River Basin and did 8 focus groups around the region of young and beginning farmers. Their average age was 36. And, not surprisingly, to probably most of you in this room, their top concern was water. That was followed by climate change, drought, and then actually number 4 was land access. Capital, training, that was all behind water. So for these young and beginning farmers, conservation practices are not a choice. They have, as young farmers, they have been farming and ranching, 10 years maybe at the most. So they have always been farming and ranching in a period of extreme drought. They are using, by and large, very good practices on their farms, but we are finding that they are simply not accessing the federal programs that could really be a huge help. About 3/4 of the farmers who responded to our survey, 3/4 of them had not accessed any NRCS programs whatsoever. And those NRC, Natural Resources Conservation Service programs, are extremely important, both because they encourage conservation practices on farm, but for the young farmer who is also dealing with this issue of capital, it helps them capitalize their farm in a way that they need to, because there is cost sharing that is provided for things like conservation plans and drip irrigation and pumps, whatever is needed. Most of those farmers are not accessing those programs, and the agents on the ground aren't fully aware of all of the opportunities that they have to help the next generation of farmers succeed. So these issues around water and assisting young and beginning farmers, around student loans, around access to loans and capital overall, and on land and land conservation, these are issues that can be solved by the federal government. They can also be solved by the state government, by state land conservation programs that give certain tax treatment to easements that are donated, and also make funding available for the purchase of development rights, which can be, in some cases, the only path for young and beginning farmers to access land over the long term. So there are many opportunities at all levels of government to help the next generation of farmers, very few of them, to help them to succeed. And in my mind, we need to help, even though there are so few of them out there right now at this stage in the game. If we can make those young and beginning farmers find success in their careers, if we can give them the assistance that they need to really make farming and ranching viable, then we are going to be able to solve this problem, this looming sort of crisis we see of this land transitioning and not enough farmers ready to step up. We're going to be able to solve it because we will have more models more young people out there that are going to be successful, that people are going to see at their farmers markets, that they're going to see in their neighborhoods, in their towns, that are making it in farming and ranching, that are doing well, that are having families, that are really living this dream that so many of the young people in our coalition have. And by doing that, more people will come, more young people will come after college, after high school. I think this problem, we can solve it if we are able to help those people who are in our communities, those young people who so desperately want to farm and ranch. So, policy. It comes back to policy. And I'm just wondering, sort of a show of hands, I've given you a lot of information here, but how many of you have engaged in the policy process before, like gone to meet with an elected official? A few people? All right, that's good. So you know what I'm talking about. So what we need you to do in the next Farm Bill, hopefully you will engage with the Young Farmers Coalition as we move some of these ideas forward. We've actually already introduced 2 pieces of legislation as marker bills for the next Farm Bill. But as we move forward, we need to hear everyone's voice in this room. And we need unity and we need solidarity around many of these issues. We have an extremely divided nation at this point. This last election brings a great deal of uncertainty to our entire nation. But I believe that actually solving the challenges of rural America, solving the challenges of farming and ranching, that is not that's not something that's just about Democratic interests or Republican interests. Those are shared interests, and many of the lawmakers who will now be in the majority of the Republican Party care very deeply about their communities and about rural America, and I believe they can provide real leadership in helping the young farmers of the United States to succeed. But they cannot do that, and they will not do that unless we show our support for young and beginning farmers and to help to elevate some of these really common sense and practical solutions that can help the next generation of farmers succeed. So I look forward to learning a lot here at the Quivira Coalition over the next couple of days and working hopefully with many of you in helping to engage this next Congress, engage this next president around the issues of rural America. We, again, have a very divided nation, but I remain hopeful that this is our shared history, and this is something that people really do believe in and can get behind. So thank you, and I would love to entertain a few questions if you have any.
Will your organization provide any sample letters or talking points for us to use when we interact with legislators or representatives?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So if you go to youngfarmers.org, if you can sign up and learn more about our policy work as it pertains to the next Farm Bill. Right now, we're actually in the process of doing another young farmer survey across the country, and as we get closer to the spring and summer of next year, we are going to be moving ahead on some legislative ideas coming out of that survey, and at that time, we will absolutely make it very easy for anyone who wants to participate in the process of making a farm bill that represents us all. We will be more than happy to help you and give you the tools that you need to feel confident to meet with an elected representative at any level.
On your left over here, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Hi, I have like a 2-part question. The first question is really, you talk about all the things that the Young Farmers Coalition does to get farmers started. What about the long-term continued support programs? Are there any? What do you do to help support those that, once you get started, to continued success. And the other, half the question is, I'm a young farmer as well. I'm a produce farmer like yourself. But how can I'm very successful in what I do. And so, I built it from the ground up without, your support, unfortunately. it was pretty hard to do. Still working through those issues, but how can individuals like us that have, bridge that or cross that, we're successful at this point, help and make a direct impact, not talking to our senators and stuff, more of a micro impact. Do you have suggestions on how we can make a more direct impact in that way?
Absolutely. So our farm, I don't know what scale you're at, but I know that on our farm we employ about 10 people a year, as I had said earlier, and some of those people stay around for like 7 years, I think has been our longest employee. And about half of those farmers go out and start farms of their own. So we don't have an apprenticeship program. We don't have any, formal sort of education that we're providing on our farm, but farms can be a place of learning, whether it's like intentional in that way or not. And so I know that my husband, Ben, in particular, has really just acted as a mentor for the employees that we have on our farm to help them, and both of us really just, helping them, just understand the opportunities that they might have for support and assistance, and really just have been there for them as mentors over the long term as they get their farms started. And that can be, like an 8 o'clock meeting, to get dinner, to talk about, okay, let's talk about your land access options, and just trying to help them like strategize. It's, going to look at a wash and pack barn to say, okay, well, you need to think about these, 10 things here, and or just doing a farm walk, whatever it might be. I think just being there for the next generation of farmers is really, really meaningful. Well, yeah, absolutely. So the most effective meetings you can have with a member of Congress, I would say, would be not just to have a bunch of beginning farmers in a room, which is actually quite effective too, but to have a farmer that's a little bit further along to show that there is huge potential for these farmers in the future if they are given the right types of support. Or for a farmer just to, like yourself, if you're not receiving a ton of support, to just talk about how hard it was and how that this might not be sustainable for many farmers. So experienced farmers are so important in our work, to share their stories and their voices, and to help us think long and hard about really the most effective and common sense policy solutions, because you've lived it, you know what works and what doesn't. So there's many opportunities, I would say, for involvement. And to answer your earlier question about okay, so this is one of the problems that we've identified, is that the young people are getting a start. They are maybe doing an apprenticeship program, maybe they're doing a training program, but then it's like they're falling off a cliff. In many cases, after they leave that program, there's not a lot there for them, or they're renting land and getting going in that way, but then there's just really no way to keep them going. And so this is where this issue of capital, of having access to affordable credit, secure credit, good credit, as well as land access, we feel like really comes into play, because we feel like those things must be in place for a farm to reach a scale where it's really supporting a farm family for a generation.
So we want to start on time at 11. We have maybe time for one more quick Q&A. Dave?
Over here on the right.
Thank you for all your efforts and your great talk. Having been in Washington and tried to work with, we recognize the vast majority of all the representatives are from urban-based situations. Mm-hmm. They know that we have all the food we need to eat, more than we need to eat, and technology will solve our problems. How can you convince an urban legislator that it's important to have young farmers on the land?
That's a great question. An urban legislator, honestly, many of the urban legislators that we work with are actually quite supportive. They are feeling, in many cases, they are representing communities that actually do not have very good access to food and to fresh food, and so they want to see more farmers markets, more fresh food available in their communities, and local farmers are providing those opportunities in a way that the larger grocery stores are simply not in many communities. So, and they're, besides that, they're receiving questions and comments from their constituents saying, we want local food here. And so the city itself, city council has actually taken up this measure that would fund farmland conservation around the city as a way to protect farmland that is going to be serving farmers who are going to be serving that urban constituency. So I suppose it certainly depends on the city, but I think that there is growing support among many urban legislators for farmers, for local food. What to do, I think, is a harder question. They want to do something, but really they don't know what. And it's up to all of us who are living it, who are in rural America, who know what's necessary, who understand the realities, to not just meet with our local people, but when we have the opportunity to tell our stories and meet with urban legislators as well, because you're right, most people in this country now live in cities, and they don't know. They don't know what's needed. So on that uplifting point, it's really a pleasure, and I am so looking forward to working with many of you. And I know, again, no matter how you voted on Tuesday, it is a time of great uncertainty for our country, and I hope you, can keep your heads down to some degree on your farms and ranches, and have fulfillment from that and joy from that. And I hope also that you will have hope in what Congress can still do even in this time, and that will work with us to tell your stories and to bring hope and to vision to many of the lawmakers in DC, across the country, who I think can be greatly inspired by the work that you're doing and the people that you're feeding, and how you are caring for our land and natural resources. So thank you.